All right, bang, bang. Today is Tuesday. It is October 12th. Welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. Before we really get into it, though, I do want to tell you guys that you already know there is a futuristic way to wipe your ass. It already exists, and it's dude wipes, okay? So dude wipes, whether it be the wipes, whether it be the dude showers, whether it be the deodorant, the powder, it's all there for you. And you know my personal favorite. And like I'm telling you right now, like I cannot endorse a product higher than the Dude Wiper 1000. It's a bidet. It's easily attachable. It can attach onto any toilet. You just kind of rewire one of the fucking rigs at the bottom there. Just watch a YouTube video, or Dude Wipes gives you great instructions, whatever it is. I'm telling you, try these out. Dude Wiper 1000. Go to dudewipes.com, enter code BC15. You get 15% off your order, or dudeproducts.com. They got everything on there. It doesn't matter. And yeah, they're also on Amazon. They're in Target. They're in Walmart. They're all over the place. I'm telling you, I'm really a big fan of these guys. I'm a big fan of the product that they put out. So go support Dude Wipes and make sure you're wiping your ass in a manner that's, I mean, really the way that everyone should be doing it. Dudewipes.com. BC15, 15% off. All right. So a bunch of guests with us today, Chief. We have our producer, Tom, who's on the couch because he has certain questions for our real guest.
Tommy Hoge.
Yeah, Tommy Hoge. And then we have a gentleman who goes by Bitcoin Marty over Zoom, who is a nice backdrop somewhere in Austin, Texas. Marty, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Eddie. Pumped to be here.
Yeah, so listen, we're going to talk about Bitcoin. And I know next to nothing about Bitcoin, so I need like really dumbed down version, okay? Because I'm one of those people that like I don't like dismiss it completely, but I just like have never really got into it. You know what I mean? So that's where I'm at.
Now my wife.
And you would say that you're a zealot, is the vibe that I get. If you go by Bitcoin Marty, I would say that this is.
Well, yeah, I mean, Bitcoin Marty was bestowed upon me while I was having my cup of coffee at Barstool Sports. I don't really refer to myself as Bitcoin Marty, but the Barstool world knows me as that. And yeah, zealot is a term that one might thrust on me and my enthusiasm for Bitcoin. I've dedicated my life to it. I guess you could say that.
Well, then, yeah, I would say that makes you a zealot. And it says in your Twitter profile, Marty at Marty Bent, a daily newsletter about #Bitcoin, host of TFTC21, a podcast about Bitcoin. So to me, that makes you a Bitcoin zealot.
Yeah, zealot, enthusiast,
is this
advocate, whatever you want to throw at it.
Mm-hmm.
Is this your job now? I mean, you got a whole mic set up over there. Like, so are you're just talking about Bitcoin?
Yes, I got the podcast and newsletter, and then I work for a Bitcoin mining company where we mine Bitcoin in oil fields.
Okay.
Yeah.
Start with that, because I always hear about the Bitcoin.
I almost want to start even broader though. Like how can we like bring it in even more?
Nakatoshi?
You know what I mean? Like how, like number one, how the hell did this all start? And I know this is like, where the fuck are you? But I do feel like there are a lot of people like me that don't know what's going on.
For sure. So start.
You disagree?
No. I'm just listening.
So tell me how it started then.
Bitcoin? So Bitcoin started with a white paper that was dropped on October 31st, 2008. A pseudonymous individual on the internet known as Satoshi Nakamoto basically went to a very popular cypherpunk mailing list where a lot of hardcore developers working on open source software that very heavily focuses on cryptography meet to talk about ideas. He went to this forum and said, hey, I've got this idea for distributed peer-to-peer cash system. I call it Bitcoin. And people on that mailing list had a discussion for a few months about whether or not it would work, whether or not it would be viable, some critiques for Satoshi's idea. And then January 3rd, 2009 is when the protocol officially launched, and you had what is known as the Genesis block was mined. And then ever since then, Bitcoin has been producing blocks and facilitating peer-to-peer digital cash transactions ever since then.
Okay. So why are you laughing?
Because you're okay was just funny.
Okay. Well, the term that always like throws me off that I just don't fucking understand is the mining. So like when I think of mining in like the traditional sense. You got guys in hard hats underground, and you get a plot of land. If you think back to like old like oil well digging, and you're just like, those are the roughnecks. They're going out in the fucking wilderness, being like, I think there's oil under here. Let's dig. and how that can be digital or whatever. I can't wrap my brain around that. So can you start there? Like, how does somebody just fucking find a Bitcoin?
So the way it works is basically Satoshi designed the protocol, and all the rules were, the consensus rules at least, were defined from the beginning when it first launched, and says there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. Here's the schedule at which they'll be dispersed to the market, and here's what you need to do to actually mine Bitcoin. And how you mine Bitcoin is you add blocks of transactions to the ledger. And so to describe mining in layman terms, essentially what you do is you run a very specific computing function that is looking for a very unique puzzle piece. You'll say it's called a hash. You're looking for a very specific hash, but you're looking for this puzzle piece. And the miner running this cryptographic function that finds the puzzle piece first can go to the network, say, hey, I found the puzzle piece. Here's the hash that proves it. And the network goes, all right, yep, that's below the target of the network right now. You can add a block of transactions to the network. And so you find that puzzle piece, you present it to the network says, yep, that's the one we're looking for. Okay. You add the block and you get rewarded with Bitcoin for doing that work. It's a proof.
Where are you finding it?
It's again, the finding the hash. So the hash is just a math function. You basically run this random math function that is looking for a very specific number, and anybody can participate. So you basically are just running this function. You run it once, and maybe the hash is over the target. So no, that's not going to work. You run it again. No, that's not going to work. It's over that target. And then you run it. Oh, it's under the target. So you can actually, that's the puzzle piece we're looking for. So you're just running that.
How many miners would you estimate are actively mining Bitcoin like right now? And why don't they just develop AI to find it?
I mean, well, so that's the beauty. Part of the beauty of the network, right? Is how many miners? Hundreds of thousands of machines running the specific function. And even if you were to attempt to get an AI to find it, the way the network works, the way Satoshi designed it, and said every 2 weeks roughly, we're gonna calculate how much computing power is dedicated to the network, and if more computing power comes onto the network over that 2 week period, we're gonna make it harder to mine, so that blocks come in on average at 10 minutes. So even if you add an immense amount of computing power to the network via AI, whatever it may be, at the end of that 2 week period, the network's going to look back, be like, all right, they're finding these puzzle pieces too quickly. We're going to make it harder to find them.
Okay. And if you find a puzzle piece, how much Bitcoin is in each puzzle piece, I guess?
So right now, again, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin.
Right.
The way Satoshi designed it, he basically dictated how much per block we're going to be distributed. So right now, if you find that puzzle piece, you add a block of transactions to the ledger, you're going to get 6.25 Bitcoin plus the fees of the transactions that are included in that block. But it started out at 50 Bitcoin per block. And then you basically have a halving of that subsidy every 210,000 blocks. So at block 210,000, it went from 50 to 25 Bitcoin. At block 420,000, went from 25 to 12.5. And then last May, at block 630,000, it went from 12.5 Bitcoin to 6.25 Bitcoin per block, which is where we are now.
That's interesting too. I didn't know, because I've heard different things about being a finite amount. So there is a confirmed finite amount. There's 21 million.
Yes, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. Something we're getting close to the 19th millionth Bitcoin having been mined.
Okay, so how long are they estimating if it gets halved every 200,000? How long are they estimating for all 21 million to be in the universe?
The most famous estimate is year 2140 will be when 21 million Bitcoin is mined. Yeah.
Damn, really? We've already have 19 out of the 21. It's going to take that long?
Yeah, I mean, that's you have this exponential halving function. For like 100 years, miners will be finding like 0.001 Bitcoin per block.
And then obviously, like, you do this for a living. So you're like all in on this.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I think it's an imperative, Bitcoin, if we're going to have freedom in the digital age.
Why is it imperative?
Because you either get the Chinese social credit scoring system and their financial system exported to the rest of the world, or you have a free and open financial system on Bitcoin. And those are the alternatives. And we do not want that Chinese social credit system exported to the U.S. and the Western world.
Okay. I got another question. And this might be a stupid question, but I've always wondered this about Bitcoin specifically. So I understand the reason for making it a fixed number, a finite number. Why it's 21, I don't think really matters unless it does. Like it seems like a rather arbitrary number, but right?
Yeah, I don't think it really matters, but
okay.
I think Satoshi,
but the fact that it's finite is the importance because it makes it valuable because it's scarce. Correct?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why it makes it valuable. Yes, it's also valuable because it enables you to do things that the traditional monetary system and payments networks won't let you do.
And it's a fight against inflation. Like we did an episode about, I think when you first reached out to us, we talked about Bitcoin a little bit in the 1971 episode where we went away from the gold standard. And this is this like a replacement for gold in your estimation?
Yeah, it's a reversion to a sound monetary system, which the gold standard was. Unfortunately for gold, due to its physical nature and the ability for it to be sort of physically co-opted by central banks, it sort of ruined that system. They created paper, basically claims on gold on top of that, and by the end of the gold standard, most of the governments had most of the gold, and it just wasn't viable as a sound monetary system anymore.
Okay, so then here's the dumb question I was referring to. So it's fixed at 21 million Bitcoin on the high end, but in my brain, I'm always like, well, it's digital. So isn't it in theory infinitely divisible? And if it's infinitely divisible, doesn't that make it, and it's going to have to be tied to some sort of value system outside of Bitcoin eventually. Like it's tied, like they always talk in worth of dollars. So if you can't get down to a penny of Bitcoin, like the Bitcoin can just be divided forever. Doesn't that kind of negate some of the scarcity of it?
No. So the analogy I like to use is, imagine if you had a pizza and you were able to divide that infinitely as well. Like you'd have very granular units, but the caloric intake of that pizza, if you were to eat the whole thing, would be the same. Similarly with Bitcoin, the fact that you can divide it into very granular pieces doesn't inflate the units. It just makes them the ability for you to use smaller units of Bitcoin, though the value within the whole system would remain the same.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Kind of, but I guess that only to me would make sense if Bitcoin was used as a currency, as like a standalone product.
Yeah, it's getting there. It's not going to happen out of the box. Obviously, you need more people to adopt it. You need value to flow into the network. It will get there, and you can use it as a standard currency today. I mean, people
in some places,
everywhere. So I have my phone here. People who listen to my podcast, Tales from the Crypt, slight plug. They send me little fractions of Bitcoin. So can you see this? You have received a payment of 9 sats. So Bitcoin is divisible into 100 million units known as Satoshis or sats. And so in my RSS feed for my podcast, I put a little Bitcoin address there and say, hey, if you're listening via a podcast app that has a Bitcoin wallet in it, you can send me pieces of Bitcoin per minute, listen to my podcast. And many people do. And so that's an example of me being a U.S. citizen here in Austin, Texas, using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange to receive funds from people who listen to my podcast.
Okay, and I guess that's but you can't then take that and run down to McDonald's and use that.
I mean, if they accepted it, I could.
Right, but they don't, which is
Does any company accept it yet, or are we there yet? I mean,
some do.
Yeah, I mean, McDonald's accepts it in El Salvador because they have to. Pizza Hut.
That's their national currency, right?
Yeah, well, they made it legal tender.
Okay.
They have a dual currency standard right now, with the U.S. dollar being the other one. But yeah, I mean, so there are there's a namesake or Namecheap, which is like a DNS provider where you buy websites and you manage your websites. They accept Bitcoin. There's VPNs. Molvad is a VPN. They accept Bitcoin. Yeah, there are very few merchants that accept Bitcoin right now, but that doesn't preclude you from using it as a day-to-day currency. That'll come with adoption as more and more merchants decide that they want to receive Bitcoin, because they either see the demand from users who want to pay in Bitcoin, or they say, hey, I actually want to accept Bitcoin because I want to hold it on my balance sheet.
Okay. And you made a comment maybe 3 to 5 minutes ago saying, like, as more value gets poured into a currency, like, I don't understand what that means. Isn't it? What do you mean by value?
There's people, like, so when you go and buy Bitcoin, and so they buy $500 worth of Bitcoin, you're basically saying, hey, I'm going to pump $500 worth of value into this network. I want to preserve value in this.
So then, sorry to interrupt, but then how? So if that's how if it gains value by being measured against a traditional form of currency, how does it then? How do you get to a point where it's inherently valuable? And how do you, like, what's that distinction going to look like, or that breakaway going to look like? Because now, to me, it looks like, well, without the dollar, the Bitcoin doesn't really have value at this point, at this juncture.
No, so I would argue against that, right? The value, again, is derived by the fundamental utility that it provides. Again, it can allow you to receive and send money in ways that the traditional system cannot. Yes, people exchange dollars for Bitcoin now, but some people, even exchange work for Bitcoin. So they don't even deal with a fiat currency to get their Bitcoin. Sometimes they'll do some work and say, hey, pay me in Bitcoin. Like, I don't even want to deal with the dollar system, the euro, the yen, whatever.
How prevalent is that?
Pretty
People
prevalent.
Yeah,
especially in developing countries where they have hyperinflated currencies. A lot of people are beginning to decide that they'd rather use Bitcoin as a savings account as opposed and receive money in Bitcoin as opposed to taking bolivars or Argentinian pesos or something like that.
When did you get in on it?
I fell down the rabbit hole. I was at DePaul University. I was studying economics, and I was actually interning at a managed futures fund in the West Loop. And at that managed futures fund, we were trading currencies, or we dealt with commodity trading advisors that we were indexing that were trading currency markets, and I had to follow. So I was working that job, and at the same time, starting to learn about Bitcoin, like 2013, 2014.
So like right after, because I know, like, the white paper said it was 2008, but it became, like, prevalent in 12. Is that accurate?
I mean, it really hit the mainstream when Silk Road blew up, where that website that allowed people to coordinate to buy and sell drugs, and they only used Bitcoin as the currency for that market. And that's really when it was thrust onto, like, the mainstream psyche. It was when that website blew up, like around then, 2012, 2013.
What I've heard about, like, confusion and arguments against, like, using Bitcoin, let's say at, like, your local market or McDonald's, is, like, if you give them, like, $10 worth of Bitcoin, like, 5 minutes later, that can be worth something completely different. Like, so is that just like something that in the future, it's just like you just deal with that fact? Like, because there's no way that's going to stop, right? Like, the value of Bitcoin.
Well, again,
I guess by a fraction.
Yeah, so it's volatile, right? And the price is volatile right now. But if you look at historical volatility, it's been trending downwards. And again, as more and more value right now, Bitcoin's $1 trillion market cap, around there. As more trillions and more trillions come into the Bitcoin network, that volatility will become more and more suppressed. And so that fluctuating price and purchasing power will I don't want to say it will cease to exist, but it'll be much less
It'll be like less
apparent in the future, yeah.
Or people would feel more comfortable using it for, like, everyday transactions.
Yeah. It'll have a more stable purchasing power as more value comes in.
And is there a timeline for that? Like,
Yeah, it just depends how quickly people adopt it, or slowly.
How many people listen to this podcast? Like, that kind of thing?
No, I mean, it just depends how quickly people become comfortable with it and need to adopt it. That's where there's a lot of people in the world right now that actually need Bitcoin. That's why they adopt it. And they're willing to stomach the short-term price volatility for the stability that the network provides.
Now, at some point, I mean, we do shit all the time about how, like, last week we did about how, the Federal Reserve, the people up top, they're the ones that are kind of doing the shady shit. Like, how much of that is a concern? Like, can't they just outlaw it at some point and then, like, everybody's fucked? Or
didn't China outlaw it?
Yeah, China did. China's outlawed it like twice a year, every year.
China's funny.
But yeah, they're gonna try. But that's the beauty of Bitcoin. So the network side of things, the way that Bitcoin works, it's a distributed network, which means many individuals around the world have a copy of the rules in the ledger on their computers, on their hardware. And so countries will certainly try to ban Bitcoin, but they'll never be able to kill it, because to kill it, they'd have to go to every individual who has a copy of the rules in the ledger on their computer and unplug it and make them stop running the software. Which is,
you'd almost have to like get rid of the internet, right? So that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, it'd be logistically infeasible, I would argue, particularly at this point. I think it's the cat's out of the bag. There's no putting it back in.
Okay, that's interesting then. I didn't know how.
I can never really keep up with it because it happened like I think like this summer where China like announced that they were banning crypto, and like things just plummeted. But then like I would talk to other people who like know crypto, and they're like, no, they do this all the time. It's just like a threat. Well, they never do it, or they can't do it.
Well, this year particularly, there was actually some bite behind the threat. They kicked out all of the miners, right? And so this is actually a great example to highlight the anti-fragility and the robustness of the network. Like there was probably like 50 to 60% of the mining power dedicated to the network within China's borders. And China got tough this year, and they kicked them all out. They made them unplug their machines, and they made them send them like abroad, which is like the dumbest thing the Chinese government could have done. They should have made them unplug them and destroy them, but they allowed the Chinese miners to either move their machines outside of the borders or sell them to people like us in the West that want to mine. And so what you had was 50% of the computing power dedicated to the network come off at once. So blocks came in much slower. It went from like 10 minutes to like 22 minutes for a 2-week period. But then at the end of that 2-week period, the network said, oh my God, blocks are coming in so slow, we're going to make it easier to mine. And so the network, after that 2-week period, just adjusted and moved on. Those miners moved out of China, and now they're getting plugged in all around the world, and that computing power is recovering. And so that shows, even if a country like China, which is one of the superpowers in the world, attempts to stomp Bitcoin, the network is very versatile. It will adapt and survive.
So then how do you get that? You said they have copies of what? Say that again. That people have copies of what on their computer?
The consensus rules in the ledger. Yeah.
So does anybody? Can anybody have that?
Yeah, you could download it on your laptop right now. You can go to bitcoin.org or some other place that's holding a copy of the consensus rules of Bitcoin. And you can.
So there is no overarching power structure, and that's like the beauty of it, correct?
Yeah, so it runs on what many would consider a rough consensus mechanism, where you have developers basically working to either make the code more efficient or add new ideas to the code base. And you basically have a bunch of developers and other enthusiasts checking what developers are putting forth and saying, that's not a good idea. Actually, this is a good idea. I'm going to download this software and vote that I want this change to the network. And then if enough people download that version, then it gets updated. But only until then. And so there's no like top down, this is what's happening. It's sort of everybody running the network says, all right, I like this, let's do it.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I know Bitcoin was first, but like, again, we talked about how it was, it's finite, the 21 million Bitcoin total, but I feel like there's new Bitcoins coming out every day.
Yeah.
So like, how do you, or not new Bitcoins, but new cryptocurrencies coming out every day. So how do you decide which ones have value? Like I've heard the term shitcoin versus something like you're saying is a more robust, stable currency which is Bitcoin. And is that just because they were a first mover, or is there something inherently written in the code of Bitcoin that makes it such a much more viable product?
Yeah. So I'm one many would consider as somebody who they would call me a Bitcoin maximalist. Like I think Bitcoin is the only one worth paying attention to and the only one worth putting any energy in, because I don't think you can replicate the way Bitcoin was launched and the way it proliferated in the early years, whereas all these shit coins that are being launched after the fact are what I would deem affinity scams attempting to ride Bitcoin's coattails, and they're more centralized. So when they launch, a lot of these shit coins will have what's called a pre-mine. The founders will set aside a certain amount that go to their team and that they get to keep. and then they'll launch it on the rest of the world, hoping that more and more people adopt it. But I would argue none of them, not even the second or third best, whether it be Ethereum or Solana or whatever is the shitcoin of the day, will ever be sufficiently robust to survive an attack from the state. Like if something like what China did earlier this year was thrust on Ethereum. Like, so Ethereum, a lot of their nodes are run on Amazon web servers, and there's one large company that maintains a lot of their nodes centrally. And so if a government were to go to Amazon, find the particular server where the company is, it's called Infura, is running a lot of the Ethereum nodes, and they just have Amazon unplug that particular server, and the Ethereum network I would argue be sufficiently destroyed or it would be unworkable. Whereas Bitcoin, again, you have more individuals around the world. You can't go to Amazon and say, hey, unplug the Bitcoin server. It's just
not good, Tom.
Yeah, so like that's like the reason that was like the only thing I was going to talk about on here was I was more in like the Ethereum game, like the stupid shitcoin game this past spring. But as I just got to learn more about the Ethereum side. But yeah, I got in on like this. One of the coins was called Hoge, basically trying to ride the coattails of Doge, which is riding the coattails off of, So, but it was just like a interesting learning experience because it was like one of the. I was trying to look it up before, like, but when it burns.
Burn supply, try to make it more scarce.
Exactly. And then
the ultrasound money or whatever they want to call it.
I didn't even know that was a term. But yeah, I know very like little about everything. Everything I learned was just from dealing with it with my own money, because it did, like, I got in at like the beginning of March. It was, kind of like a movement among like the Barstool world of like just being like, hey, like let's all get like a piece of this shitcoin, like everyone's getting a piece of it. And like there was that huge I don't know if I'm sure you like saw that trend that happened this past spring with the shit coins. But then there was SafeMoon, and there was Shiba, then there was something else. But it was all on the Ethereum.
Yeah, they're all being built on their ERC20 right? tokens. Or
so you don't like you're not a fan of like the Ethereum model or whatever? Because like the way you just like described top to bottom how Bitcoin works, I know Ethereum works different. Right. I
can't seem to understand if Ethereum is its own coin or if it's a platform.
It's so Ethereum is a platform. Its native token is Ether, and then you can launch more tokens on top of Ethereum as well.
Okay.
That most of the time you have to transfer Ether to receive, I believe. Yeah, I mean, when I first got in 2013, I fell down the shitcoin rabbit hole as well. I was like, Bitcoin's too slow. It's too dumb. It's not innovating.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go. I think Litecoin or this proof of stake coin is going to be much better. But you get
Ripple.
These cycles, these shitcoin cycles it's like time is a flat circle. They happen time and time again. And again, I don't think they're ever going to get to a point where they're sufficiently distributed to survive.
I kind of knew this was going to be your answer, but I just wanted to.
No, and then Ethereum, like specifically, like they've almost admitted that they've failed. They cannot scale their blocking. They have to transition to a whole new one.
They're going to do like Ethereum 2.0. I heard.
Yeah, so they're in the middle of that transition, and that's been coming. So I have a long thread on Twitter that I've been building on since like August of 2017 of them just like pushing back this transition.
So do you not have much faith in that Ethereum 2.0? Because I just, from the people I've like gotten my info from or whatever, like friends who are kind of more into it than me, like they've said that like when that comes, it would be like it would change the game type of thing. Like Ethereum would blow up and become like the next Bitcoin.
No, I mean, they're certainly going to try, and they may even do it. But when the transition to Ethereum 2.0 is basically a reversion to the Federal Reserve bank system you have. With that system, they're going to proof of stake.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Like it's all the wealthy are going to be able to control that network. The way the proof of stake, it's a different consensus mechanism than proof of work. We're getting really in the weeds here.
No, I like the weeds. Can you just quickly define the difference between proof of stake and proof of work?
So proof of work is energy intensive. Again, you're finding that those hash functions, you have to do work
so that's
by
the mining.
the energy spending electricity. Proof of stake is different, where you really exert control over the network via your stake in the network, how much ether you own. And so people with the most ether, with the biggest chunks of ether, will be the validators of the chain, and they'll be able to dictate how that consensus mechanism or the rules of the network change or don't change moving in the forward.
All right, hey, let's take a quick break here because we got to talk about Roman. I love this. This is like the futuristic episode. We're talking about Bitcoin. So we're talking about Roman. You guys know the swipes. Clinically proven way to last longer in bed. Don't be sitting there thinking about what Bitcoin you got. How am I going to go there? Bitcoin ATMs. I mean, we're talking about mining. I still don't really know what's going on, but it doesn't matter. I'm here to talk about Roman and futuristic ways to help you, and that's Roman with the Roman swipes, okay? It doesn't transfer to your partner, which is important. They want to ask you, hey, what's going on here? They can ship to you in discreet, unmarked packaging, and each swipe packet is small enough to hide in your wallet for whenever you need it. All you do is swipe it on, you let it dry, and you're good to go. That's it, all right? Clinically proven, like I said, that's the big part here. Clinically proven way to help you last longer in bed. Go to GetRoman.com/walk, and you can get your first month of swipes for just $5 when you choose a monthly plan. That's GetRoman.com/walk. Make sure you're using these. They're easy to use, fast acting, and it's the best way to go about your business if you're getting down to business. How about that? That was pretty good, I thought. All right, let's hop back into the show. Can you explain Elon's position right now? Because didn't ever Bitcoiner love him? Now they hate him. How does that work?
I don't know. Elon's immersed in some weird political game with China because he wants Tesla to like proliferate with China. So he's been posturing one way or another. I believe this is just what I'm gleaning from what I know they're trying to do in China and the way he's been positioning himself. Elon's a massive troll at the end of the day. I believe he's.
Oh, that's interesting. So do you like look at the dollar and just like shake your head? You're disgusted?
Yeah, we call it the cuck buck now.
The cuck buck.
Why do you call it the cuck buck?
Because it cucks you, right? The dollar, the fact that the Fed and the Treasury in conjunction with each other are just printing more and more units of the dollar, it's debasing your purchasing power. So you're cucked to the whims of the central bankers and the entities at the Treasury. You're not allowed to have any say in how that works, and you're essentially holding a monetary good that's losing its value and its purchasing power over time, and there's nothing you can do about it because you have no control. Whereas Bitcoin, you can have certainty that there's only ever going to be 21 million, and to change that would be extremely, extremely hard to the point where it's highly unlikely, and so that preserves your purchasing power or your stake in the network. One Bitcoin is going to equal one Bitcoin throughout the history of Bitcoin. And so time is money, money is time. So you're essentially working, you're exerting your life force, and you're spending your time to earn a paycheck. Right now, most people are getting paid in cuck bucks. And so they're spending time it's worth X amount of purchasing power when you work. And then as they inflate it more in the future, when you go to spend it, you're going to get less purchasing power.
Now, are you seeing, and I feel like I already know the answer to this question, but I feel like the big banks now are investing in crypto heavily.
Yes.
Do you see that as a threat, or is that something that is a positive thing for the crypto universe?
It's more neutral. I mean, that's the nature of Bitcoin's open source. Like the way it works, it's open source. Anybody can join. Big banks, mom and pop shops. Like it's just inevitable that people will get into it. I think the banks are probably more focused on like the crypto side of things, the shit coins, because they see an opportunity to be able to move immense amounts of capital and sort of have more control over the return profile of the smaller altcoins, if you will. But in terms of Bitcoin, if they come in, like there's nothing you can do. They're going to come in or they're not. It's just the nature of the system. Anybody who wants to can get Bitcoin. They can get a lot of Bitcoin, but they'll never again have control over the network. They'd have to convince everybody running nodes or the consensus rules to make changes that they would want. They can't just use the money to influence the changes on the network.
But couldn't they, if they were like deeply in bed with various fiat currencies around the world, couldn't governments and the biggest banks work together to buy effectively market share and just park it. Be like, we're not going to use it in transactions. We're just going to keep it. And then it's like it's not available to the market for people to buy. So then it has no value because no one can have access to it.
Well, that would be incredible.
Like a Scrooge McDuck
I mean,
gold vault.
I would love if they did that. They could take it, they hold it off the market, which increases the value of all the other Bitcoin. And there's enough free floating Bitcoin in the hands of individuals where you'd be able to have a transactional economy. On top of that, again, since Bitcoin's very divisible, the value would go up and you'd be able to transact in smaller units. If they wanted to do that, go for it. I'd love it.
What's up with people getting locked out of their account and then they're fucked? How does that work?
So there's a bunch of nuance here. The way Bitcoin works, it takes extreme ownership. Again, it's digital cash, and by cash, the definition of cash that Satoshi is sort of building on is cash as a bearer instrument, an instrument that you bear, that you hold yourself if you're using Bitcoin correctly. And so the way you hold Bitcoin, again, it's all based on cryptography. You create what's called a private public key pair. Your private key is essentially your password that allows you to access your Bitcoin, and your public key or your public address is your basically your place on the ledger. It says, hey, here's where Marty's Bitcoin live. If he wants to move these Bitcoin, he has to sign with this private key. And so if you lose that private key backup, you're shit out of luck. You can't access your Bitcoin in that slot that's dedicated to you via that public address. So yes, there have been a lot of people that have lost Bitcoin because they've lost their private keys over time. This has gotten, the risk of that has gotten significantly less as the UX around private public key management has gotten better, as software developers have built tools to make sure that you can manage your keys without a high risk of losing them. And there's better practices around that. But yes, if you do lose your private key and the backup to your private key, you're going to lose your Bitcoin. Bitcoin demands extreme ownership.
So what is that? If you lose your Bitcoin through some means that Eddie's talking about, is there any way over a period of time? Because I assume every Bitcoin has its own unique mark, fingerprint, whatever you want to call it. Is there any way like, hey, this has been lost for 50 years. We're going to cycle it back into this like mining pool? Or is it just gone forever? Like it's like you dropped a chest full of treasure in a shipwreck in the bottom of the ocean, it's just gone.
The latter. Yeah, it's just gone.
Okay, interesting.
Is that going to affect anything? The 21 million?
Well, again, it's similar to the example Chief gave of the banks and governments trying to hold supply off the market. That's all it would do. Was you can't move those Bitcoin. It would be off the market, therefore increasing the value of everybody else's Bitcoin.
Is there a number that is that known right now, that how much is just inactive?
There's estimated like 4 million, I believe. Around 4 million Bitcoin have been lost forever.
Wow. So a significant chunk of the 21.
Yes. Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's like almost 20%.
Yeah. I think like around 17% are, again, you can only guess, you don't know. There could be Bitcoin that have been dormant for 10 years and people just assume that the private key is lost, but it could just be some hardened holder who one day will wake up and sign his private key and move the Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, I did that shit in 2013. Now it's when I'm worth $70 billion. Yeah. Okay.
What's the greatest Bitcoin story you know about someone who like bought in early and then they cashed out? And do you have anything like that?
Oh yeah, I actually had. This is actually a great story. I had an individual. He goes by the name John Doe. He was on Tales from the Crypt a couple years ago. And he was like one of the largest drug dealers on the Silk Road, like when it was popping. I believe he was like the second biggest drug dealer on the Silk Road. He was working out of Colorado. I feel comfortable saying this because he came on my podcast and told the story. And he was having a party at his apartment one night, and the cops came and busted it, and they found all of his drugs. And those were drugs that he was mailing to people all around the world. But the cops just assumed he was a local drug dealer dealing to the local Colorado community he was living in. So he went to jail for 4 years. I believe this was in 2012 or 2013. And when he got out, the cops handed him back his laptop with all of his Bitcoin on it. And he was able to go spend it. So he was actually forced to hold Bitcoin from like $20 to like a $1,300 Bitcoin. And he came out of jail after 4 years a billionaire.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Holy fuck.
Where are you allowed to say what he's doing now?
I think he's just chilling. I think he's just enjoying
Just
life.
chilling as a billionaire.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a wild
That's
story.
insane.
Would you? How long would you go to jail for, Eddie, to come out a billionaire?
Fucking 4 years, definitely.
I think so.
Definitely 4
Yeah.
years.
Beyond that, it gets a little
Yeah.
hairy.
Few people my age have Bitcoin stories because I remember it. It was faced to me in like 2013, 2012. If you were around my age, like for the Silk Road, if you wanted to purchase, hypothetically, if a friend of mine wanted to purchase like a fake ID, let's say, it would be like, hey, I need to the only way to buy this is like doing through this thing Bitcoin, which is like, it's like $100 for one of them though. It was like, that sounds like a ripoff. What the fuck
Yeah.
what do you mean it's $100 for one Bitcoin? Like, I don't understand that.
It's like Dave and Buster's.
So my friend, he bought it and like he had Bitcoin, and then like that thing happened with, I think he had like two, and he just lost the code. Like he like lost access to it forever. But it was back when you were a kid, and you were like trying to like do illegal things with it. And
How were, because you said, what was it, El Salvador or Guatemala made it there?
El Salvador made a legal tender.
Okay. So it's legal tender. Do governments have any plan or any ability to tax income earned through Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, it already is here in the U.S. Like
It is. How does that, how can't you, but isn't that like, how do you?
You just
have
mark
to
the market at
disclose
the time of receipt of the Bitcoin, and you get the U.S. dollar value. You just mark that as income, and if you don't move it or sell it, you don't have to pay capital gains tax on it.
So it's just tax your capital gains.
No, just like, so for my business, for the podcast and the newsletter, we accept Bitcoin. People buy the ability to have shout outs on the podcast, and they pay in Bitcoin. Some ad deals pay in Bitcoin.
Okay.
So when they pay me, I hold all the Bitcoin that they pay with. And so I hold it on my wallet, and the wallet I use has very granular data on when it was received, what the US dollar price was at the time. And so when I receive it at the time, I take the US dollar amount of the revenue and just mark that as income and then pay that income tax. If I were then to take that Bitcoin,
It sounds like you're doing that voluntarily.
yeah, like
I'm very public about this, so I pay my taxes and try to.
There are people at this company who don't pay their taxes, so it's good of you.
Yeah, I've got a
fucked up.
big target on my back, so I try to have
That's not
everything
true,
buttoned
by
up.
the way. I don't know what the fucking IRS is listening.
is there a faction of the IRS now that can, like, their job is to like track people
Yeah, they're
like
they're
that?
getting all
'Cause,
the-
like,
they're getting
yeah.
getting hot and horny about tracking people doing this stuff.
That's hard to imagine, though. I'd picture a bunch of old ass fuckers with thick rimmed glasses using fax machines still.
Yeah,
At the IRS.
Luckily,
Yeah.
the IRS is very understaffed. My goal is to outhold the IRS. I believe when I finally spend most of my Bitcoin, the IRS won't be around.
So Marty, real quick, I just was texting.
What do you mean the IRS isn't going to be around?
I think we're experiencing the death throes of the modern nation state as we know it. Like,
So we're gonna have a one world currency and a one world government, and that's gonna be Bitcoin.
no, it won't be one world government. I think we're going to get back to like a balkanized world where, like we've seen with COVID, like states asserting their rights. I think you're going to see more secessions, and I think the U.S. is going to break up into.
So balkanized meaning like Yugoslavia's breakup. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that's the future of
So you
large
think-
nation states.
Is that why you moved to Texas? So they're going to be the first one.
One of the reasons is the potential it does play out.
I was joking, Marty.
I do.
Okay.
I mean, it's crazy what's going on right now.
What's your timeline for the dissolution of the United States?
I don't know. It depends how quickly they fuck up the money, and they seem to be doing that pretty quickly these days. So
Bitcoin Marty comes in with very knowledgeable first 42 minutes, and then boom, right over he comes in with a bunch of fucking...
I mean,
Well,
you just look at the trends of everything that's going on right now. I think it's the natural. I think it's the natural way forward. I think.
And what if we have like a solar flare that comes through and knocks out the internet?
Then we've got a lot more problems than
Then we're fucked.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Better hope you have
Like-
guns and fucking food. That's
Guns and crypto, and that's how you survive the apocalypse. How you survive the 21st century. I guess my last question is, everybody rails against like fiat currencies and because it's not tied to gold. It's not tied to any fixed asset. So it's just on confidence, essentially, is what the value of the dollar is belief and confidence. Isn't Bitcoin similar in a sense that it's just like everybody has just decided that it's valuable, so it is? But couldn't it go the other way? People are like, fuck this thing. Bitcoin is a shit coin too.
Well, like that's the thing. Like one of the old adages of the Bitcoin world is don't trust, verify. So it's not like don't just have confidence that it works, verify that it works. Like you can, again, download the consensus rules and the ledger on your laptop, on your computer, and you can verify that it works the way it does. And you can have confidence that it will work in the future. And in terms of people losing confidence in just using Bitcoin generally, like I don't think that's going to happen, because again, the nature of the network is such that it gives you utility that does not exist in the traditional financial and payment systems. And that utility is inherently valuable to many people in the world. So for example, when I was working in New York, my wife was working at an advertising agency in New York, and she worked with a lot of Venezuelan coworkers. And obviously, the U.S. has sanctioned Venezuela. It's very hard to get money there. And so I helped one of her coworkers send Bitcoin to her family members in Venezuela who needed to pay for medicine. They had no way to get dollars to her parents. And so I had her spin up a Bitcoin wallet, had them spin up a Bitcoin wallet in Venezuela. And then we were able to send Bitcoin from New York to Venezuela. Her parents were then able to take that Bitcoin, turn it to bolivars, pay for medicine. And so that transfer mechanism, the fact that we could move money from the US to Venezuela, which wouldn't have been possible via traditional means, that has inherent value. I think more and more people are going to recognize that value moving forward. And so that's just one example. Obviously, you have a bunch of people with certain political views getting deplatformed. They're getting kicked off Visa, kicked off MasterCard, kicked off PayPal. And so Bitcoin, they could turn to Bitcoin and use that payment and monetary rail. And there's no one that will ever be able to step in and say, hey, Marty can't send Bitcoin to Chief because he thinks the IRS is going to die within his lifetime.
Well, can you, just as a test, do you want to just send me some?
Yeah, I mean, I can send you some right now. If you have a wallet, I'll send you.
I'll spin one up.
I have a wallet. You can send it to me. You can send it to me. I'll set it up for Chief.
I guess my last question we could probably end here. So what would you recommend here for someone who has no Bitcoin? What's the first step? What would someone do? What would you recommend someone to do?
I'd learn about it. I'd do some research on it, decide if you think it's valuable. I think you'll find that it is. There's many resources out there. Bitcoin.page is one resource. The Nakamoto Institute.org is another great resource with a lot of the historical lead ups to how Bitcoin came to be, and a lot of good information on the economic theory behind Bitcoin. My podcast, Tales from the Crypt, we talk about Bitcoin all the time. I write a daily newsletter about it. But yeah, I would recommend learning about it. Maybe buy a little Bitcoin and practice sending and receiving transactions to get comfortable with it and recognize the power of it. And yeah, so I would download a wallet that isn't centralized. You have to create your own private key and then preserve that. And then what really drove home the value of Bitcoin for me was the first time I recovered Bitcoin using my 12-word seed phrase, which represents my private key. I was down in St. John on a family trip, and I had spent all my money, and I had a little Bitcoin private key in my notebook. So I was down in St. John, had no money in my bank account, was able to take that 12 words, download a software wallet, put those 12 words in, my Bitcoin were there. I moved the Bitcoin to exchange, sold it, and had some cash in St. John. So that, for me at least, was a huge aha moment. Like, holy crap, like I could carry these 12 words around in my head. I can walk around naked around the world and always get access to my money no matter where I am if I just have access to a software wallet. I think that if you do that, small amount, don't go crazy with any large amount of money. They're like $5-10. Just test it out, and I think you'll immediately recognize the power of the network and what we have here.
So I guess I have one final question. What's the biggest challenge facing Bitcoin and I guess crypto in general?
UX, user experience, and just again interacting with this alien technology. It's very clunky and hard at the moment, but the way I like to frame it is the UX around Bitcoin has only gotten better over time. It's going to be a process. Again, you're not going to get everything out of the box. It's not going to have all the value necessary to have it be a stable currency. It's not going to have all the software written to make it very usable. But over time, all that stuff will come if you have patience and you look at the developer talent that's beginning to focus their attention on the space. It's becoming obvious that these areas are going to get better, but they do need to get better. Just the ability to send and receive Bitcoin needs to get easier, and it needs to be dumbed down for the masses.
I would agree.
Yeah,
I need it dumped down.
Yeah, no, it's happening. Today, that's part of like the risk profile. If you're willing to take the risk to get in early when it's hard to send and receive, you are able to participate in that asymmetric financial return as more and more people adopt it as it gets easier.
Did you have a final thing?
Yeah. My only final question would be for any listeners or people out there like me who are probably already are in the crypto game or got into it because, especially this past year with the blow up of Doge and then all the things that came about after that. I think I probably already know your answer, but just like what your advice would be for people who are holding any type of cryptocurrency besides Bitcoin are you just going to be like, well, just put it into Bitcoin? Or you're like,
I mean, that's what I would recommend, but I don't want to like force anybody to do anything. Maybe the best thing to do would just go back and try to find historically the top 10 coins year in and year out. And what you'll find is you constantly churn. Like
so you don't think it's possible for there to be Bitcoin is the gold and then something else is like the silver equivalent?
I don't think it's necessary. Bitcoin can be both. Like there's no reason to have, and why would you want a worse money when you have the best money that's ever existed in Bitcoin? Like you can use it the way that Bitcoin's being built out in a layered stack is I think the best way forward. I don't think you need multiple cryptocurrencies. That's something we're trying to get away from. Is a global bartering system for currencies. Why would I trade my Bitcoin for Litecoin to go spend it when I can put my Bitcoin on a second layer and spend it just as easily?
I think the answer to that would be like the people who are looking at it as a way to like make money and not as the future of currency.
And to be clear, people have made a shit ton of money and they will continue to make money as these things pump and dump. But again, it's a game of hot potato. If you're not a seasoned trader who understands like value at risk and how to time the markets and when to sell, 92% of traders lose money in the long run. Like if you're thinking you're like that top 8% or whatever, go for it. But I bet everybody at home is trading crypto. It's like, oh yeah, I'm in that 8%, but most of you are not. And not trying to be mean. It's just statistically a fact.
Fact, at least for this robot.
Well, all right, Marty. Thank you one more time. What's your show? Where can everybody find you? What's going on with that?
Tales from the Crypt, a Bitcoin podcast. You can find it on any podcasting app. tftc.io is the website. I'm on Twitter at Marty Bent. And thank you guys for having me on. A huge fan of your show. As a former Chicago guy, love the banter and big fan of Barstool. I would not be here without Barstool Sports. So I could say that pretty certainly. So thank you for having me and shout out.
Awesome. Well, yeah. Thanks for doing it, man. It was very informative. So thank you.
Yeah. Anytime. If you guys ever have any questions, feel free to reach out.
I will. I probably will.
I was going to wait until like after, but I was actually going to ask you that, Marty. Would I be able to like follow up with you to ask you?
Yeah. My DMs are open.
There you go.
Okay, cool.
You got my email too. You can email me or
awesome.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. That's it for today. We'll catch you tomorrow. See you then. Thanks, Marty.
Marty, that was great. Thanks, man.
I hope it wasn't. Sometimes my wife yells at me for not being able to actually dumb it down for people.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I thought it was. I was able to follow what you're saying. I think for the most part.
It was.
Yeah. Some of the stuff. The mining is. I think that will always be confusing to me.
Well, the mining is actually the most interesting part because it's actually going to lead us to an energy renaissance. Bitcoin mining. I swear to God.
Don't stop recording yet. How is that going to, what do you mean an energy renaissance through mining? What are you talking about?
So the incentives of Bitcoin mining, right? It's a very low margin business. So you're incentivized to find the lowest cost energy that you possibly can. And so what you find is the lowest cost energy is energy that's being wasted. So we go to oil fields in North Dakota, my company, and on the oil field, they're flaring natural gas because they don't have a pipeline to get it to market. So they're just wasting this precious resource.
Get out of here. That is.
And so we show up and we say, hey, don't waste this. We'll plug it to a generator, create electricity on site, and mine Bitcoin with it, which allows us
Holy shit.
to mine Bitcoin.
Do they charge you something for that? Or they?
It depends. Like right now, since natural gas prices are high, they will. But if they really only care about the oil, if they don't have pipeline capacity, they'll just give us the gas because there's very strict flaring regulations in some states in the country. So North Dakota, that's why we're there.
Yeah.
If they flare a certain amount, they have to shut down their oil production. So they're highly incentivized to reduce.
So they want you guys. They should be paying you.
Yeah, exactly.
Why aren't they paying you to pump their gas?
Some of them do, yeah. So they pay us, they allow us to get our cost near zero, and we can mine Bitcoin very cheaply, very profitably. Yeah.
Wow.
That's very interesting.